The icy wind lashed the Kansas plains with a ferocity that seemed intent on tearing life itself from the earth. It was the winter of 1878, and the small wooden cabin where the McAllister brothers lived creaked under the weight of accumulated snow. Inside, 7 children huddled around a dying fire, their stomachs growling with hunger. Samuel, the eldest at barely 14, looked at his younger brothers with a mixture of protection and desperation. After him came Thomas, 12 years old, the twins Michael and Matthew, 10, little Sarah, 8, Benjamin, 6, and baby Daniel, barely 3 years old. Their parents had died of typhoid fever the previous autumn, leaving them orphaned in the middle of nowhere. "I'm hungry, Samuel," murmured Sarah, her big blue eyes filled with tears. Her cheeks were sunken, and her small hands trembled not just from the cold. "I know, little one," Samuel replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Tomorrow, I'll go to town to look for work." But Samuel knew the chances were slim. The nearest town, Dodge City, was 2 days' travel away, and the settlers had their own problems. The winter had been particularly harsh, and many families were struggling to survive. The following days passed like a haze of cold and hunger. Samuel managed to hunt a small rabbit, but the meat lasted barely a day among the 7. The children were visibly weakening, and Daniel, the youngest, had developed a worrying cough. It was then that Jeremiah Blackwood appeared. Jeremiah Blackwood was a man who lived on the margins of frontier society. A trader, smuggler, and some whispered something worse. He had a reputation for getting anything for the right price. He was tall and thin, with an unkempt beard and eyes that seemed to evaluate the worth of everything they saw. He arrived at the McAllister cabin in a sled pulled by 2 hardy horses, carrying sacks of corn and provisions. The children watched him with a mixture of hope and wariness when he knocked on the door. "Are you the boy in charge here?" asked Blackwood, looking Samuel up and down. "Yes, sir," Samuel replied, straightening his shoulders. "I'm Samuel McAllister." Blackwood glanced inside the cabin, noting the hungry faces of the children. A cruel smile drew across his face. "Looks like you've had hard times," he said, feigning compassion, "but perhaps we can help each other." What followed was the most difficult conversation of Samuel's life. Blackwood offered him a deal. He would take the 7 brothers, and in exchange he would give them 2 sacks of corn and enough provisions for the winter. The children would be sold to an Apache tribe he knew, where they would supposedly work as servants. "They won't be mistreated," Blackwood lied. "The Apaches need workers, and you need food. It's a solution for everyone." Samuel wrestled between desperation and the intuition that something was terribly wrong. But when he looked at Daniel, who could barely stand, and at Sarah, who hadn't smiled in weeks, he felt he had no choice. "Will you keep us together?" he asked with a broken voice. "Of course," Blackwood lied again. "You're brothers. The Apaches respect family bonds." With his heart shattered, Samuel accepted the deal. That night, the 7 brothers embraced for the last time in the cabin that had been their home, not knowing that their true home was about to begin in the most unexpected way. The journey lasted 4 days across the snowy plains of Kansas toward New Mexico territory. The McAllister brothers traveled in the back of Blackwood's wagon, huddled under rough blankets, sharing what little warmth they could generate. Samuel kept Daniel in his arms, while Thomas helped care for Sarah. The twins Michael and Matthew stayed close, and Benjamin, despite his young age, tried to be brave like his older brothers. During the journey, Blackwood told them stories about the Apaches, most of them full of exaggerations and lies designed to frighten them. He spoke of savage warriors, bloody rituals, children who disappeared in the night. The little ones clung to each other, terrified. "Don't listen to him," Samuel whispered to his brothers. "Stay together, no matter what happens." On the 4th day, they reached an Apache camp near the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The camp was larger than the children had imagined, with tipis arranged in concentric circles and smoke rising from multiple fires. Warriors on horseback patrolled the perimeter, and the sound of voices in an unknown language filled the air. Blackwood stopped the wagon near the center of the camp and got down. The brothers stayed behind, hugging each other as they watched the Apaches approach. Many of them looked at them with curiosity, but not with the hostility Blackwood had made them expect. Then the chief appeared. Ayana was an imposing man, probably about 40 years old, with long black hair adorned with eagle feathers and scars that spoke of many battles. But what most impressed the children were his eyes, deep, intelligent, and surprisingly gentle. Blackwood approached him and began speaking in a mixture of English and Apache, gesturing toward the children. Samuel couldn't understand everything, but he caught words like work, serve, and price. Ayana listened in silence, his eyes moving from Blackwood to the 7 brothers. When Blackwood finished, the Apache chief approached the wagon and studied the children for a long moment. "What are your names?" he asked in surprisingly clear English. Samuel, gathering all his courage, replied, "I'm Samuel McAllister. These are my brothers Thomas, Michael, Matthew, Sarah, Benjamin, and Daniel." Ayana nodded slowly. "I am Ayana, leader of this band. Blackwood says he wants to sell you to my people." "Yes, sir," Samuel murmured, lowering his gaze. "Look at me, boy," Ayana said firmly, but without cruelty. "In my people, persons are not sold like cattle, but I see that you are hungry, scared, and far from home. Is this what you want?" Samuel felt tears stinging his eyes. "No, sir, but we had no choice. We were going to starve to death." Ayana closed his eyes for a moment, as if making a difficult decision. When he opened them, he addressed Blackwood with a voice that could have cut steel. "Take your corn and go. The children stay." "But our deal," Blackwood began. "Our deal was for workers, not slaves," Ayana interrupted, "and certainly not for children who can barely stand. Leave before I change my mind about letting you go." Blackwood, seeing the determination in the Apache chief's eyes and noticing that several warriors had approached, decided it was better not to argue. He got on his wagon and left, leaving the 7 brothers alone with the Apache tribe. The first days in the Apache camp were a mixture of fear, confusion, and surprise. The brothers expected to be put to work immediately, but instead they were taken to Ayana's tipi with his wife Itzel. Itzel was a middle-aged woman with braided grey hair and gentle hands that seemed to heal with touch. When she saw the malnourished and frightened children, her maternal heart was immediately activated. "Poor little ones," she murmured, examining Daniel, who was still coughing. "First we need to feed them and heal them, then we'll see what we do." During the following weeks, the McAllister brothers were gradually integrated into camp life. Ayana explained to them that his people, the Mescaleros, had been forced to live on reservations by the U.S. government, but his band had managed to remain free in the mountains. "We know what it's like to lose family, to lose home," he told them one night as they sat around the fire. "When we were children, soldiers came to our village. They killed my father, took my sister. Itzel and I met at a school where they sent us to civilize us." The children listened attentively as Ayana related his story, beginning to understand that these savages Blackwood had spoken of were people who had suffered as much as they had. "Why are you helping us?" Samuel asked one night. "Because when you have the chance to choose between kindness and cruelty, you must always choose kindness," Ayana replied. "It's what makes us human." As the months passed, the McAllister brothers began to adapt to their new life. They learned the Apache language, the tribe's customs, and the skills necessary to survive in the mountains. Samuel learned to hunt with bow and arrow from Ayana, who proved to be a patient teacher. Thomas showed a natural talent for working with horses, and soon was helping care for the tribe's herd. The twins Michael and Matthew became expert scouts, capable of moving silently through the forest. Sarah, the only girl, was taken under the wing of Itzel and the other women of the tribe. She learned to prepare traditional medicines, weave baskets, and prepare food. Benjamin, despite his young age, showed an exceptional memory for the tribe's stories and traditions, and Daniel, the youngest, became the mascot of the entire camp. His laughter was medicine for hearts that had seen too much suffering. But integration wasn't easy. The children dealt with homesickness, guilt for surviving when their parents couldn't, and uncertainty about their future. There were nights of crying, days of rebellion, and moments when it seemed they would never adapt. It was during one of these difficult moments that Ayana taught them the most important lesson. Pain is like fire, he told them while Samuel struggled with nightmares about his parents' death. It can destroy you, or it can strengthen you, but only you can choose which it will be. Their first winter with the tribe was the real test. The mountains became inhospitable, and the tribe had to move constantly to find shelter and food. The children, who had been raised in a cabin with solid walls, had to learn to survive in tipis and caves. During a particularly fierce storm, the camp was trapped in a cave for a week. Food was scarce, and the youngest and oldest began to weaken. It was then that the McAllister brothers had the opportunity to prove their worth. Samuel and Thomas volunteered to go out in search of food, risking their lives in the storm. The twins used their scouting skills to find another entrance to the cave that led to an underground stream. Sarah used the medicinal skills she had learned from Itzel to care for the sick. When the storm finally passed, the entire tribe had seen that these white children were not just mouths to feed, but true members of the Apache family. "Today you have proven that you are our children in spirit," Ayana declared during the ceremony that followed. "You are no longer the McAllister brothers, you are our brothers." 3 years had passed since the brothers arrived at the Apache camp. Samuel was now 17 and was considered a young warrior. Thomas had developed a reputation as the tribe's best horse trainer. The twins had become respected scouts. Sarah was Itzel's most promising apprentice. Benjamin was the keeper of tribal stories, and Daniel, now 6 years old, spoke Apache more fluently than English. They had found peace, purpose, and a family that loved them unconditionally. But the past has a way of returning when you least expect it. One spring day, while Samuel was hunting with the Ayana, they saw smoke in the distance. It wasn't the smoke from a campfire, but the thick black smoke of something burning. They ran toward the place and found the remains of a wagon, still smoking. Among the debris they found Jeremiah Blackwood, seriously injured but alive. He had been attacked by bandits who stole his cargo and burned his wagon. "Help me," he murmured when he saw Ayana. "Please." Samuel felt an old fury boiling in his chest. This was the man who had sold them, who had lied about their fate. But when he looked at Ayana, he saw something different in the Apache chief's eyes. "What do we do with him?" Samuel asked. "What we always do," Ayana replied. "What is right?" They took Blackwood back to the camp, where Itzel and Sarah cared for him until he recovered. During his convalescence, Blackwood witnessed something he had never expected: a society based on compassion, mutual respect, and care for the most vulnerable. He saw Samuel, now a strong and confident young man, teaching the smaller children to hunt. He saw Thomas working patiently with a wild horse, never losing patience. He saw the twins returning from a scouting mission, reporting on the best routes to avoid US soldiers. He saw Sarah, now a young woman, preparing medicines with the precision of a doctor. He saw Benjamin, the storyteller, keeping alive the tribe's oral tradition. And he saw Daniel, completely integrated, playing with the other Apache children as if he had been born there. "I don't understand," he told Ayana one night. "I sold them to you. Why do you care for me? Why don't you let me die?" Ayana looked at him with a mixture of sadness and compassion. "Because when you have the chance to choose between kindness and cruelty, you must always choose kindness. It's what makes us human. But I showed no kindness toward those children." "No," Ayana agreed, "but they have shown it toward you, and that's what matters." When Blackwood recovered enough to travel, he faced a decision. He could leave and never return, or he could stay and face the tribe's judgment for what he had done. To everyone's surprise, he chose to stay. "I want to make amends for what I did," he declared before the tribal council. "I know I can't undo the past, but maybe I can do something good with the future I have left." The council deliberated for hours. Some wanted to expel him, others wanted to punish him more severely, but it was Samuel who spoke the final word. "When we arrived here, we were broken, hungry, hopeless children," he said, his voice firm but not bitter. "Ayana taught us that pain can destroy us or strengthen us. Blackwood caused us pain, but that pain brought us here to our true family. If we can forgive, if we can choose kindness over revenge, then we will be stronger than the pain they tried to cause us." The council voted unanimously. Blackwood could stay, but he would have to earn his place in the tribe through his actions, not his words. The following years were of growth and change for everyone. Blackwood, working to earn the forgiveness he didn't deserve, became a valuable member of the tribe. He used his connections with the outside world to warn the tribe about troop movements, to get medical supplies, and to help other tribes in need. The McAllister brothers continued to grow and prosper. Samuel married a young Apache woman named Ayana, named in honor of the chief, and became a respected leader. Thomas established the best horse breeding operation in the entire territory. The twins became legendary scouts, known for their ability to find safe routes through hostile territory. Sarah married a young warrior and became a renowned healer, combining traditional Apache medicine with knowledge she had learned from medical books that Blackwood obtained for her. Benjamin became the tribe's official historian, the keeper of stories that connected the past with the present. And Daniel, the baby who had once been on the brink of death from starvation, became a bridge between worlds. He spoke English, Spanish, and Apache fluently, and became a diplomat who helped negotiate between his adoptive tribe and the outside world. 20 years after 7 hungry children were sold for a sack of corn, Samuel McAllister stood on a mountain top, looking down at the valley where his tribe had established their permanent camp. The U.S. government had finally recognized their right to exist, largely thanks to Daniel's diplomatic efforts and Blackwood's connections. At his feet, he saw his own children playing with his brother's children, a new generation that was growing up knowing they belonged to two worlds but were completely at home in both. "What are you thinking about?" asked Ayana, the chief, approaching with slow but firm steps. He was now 60 years old, and the decades had silvered his hair, but his eyes remained as gentle as the day he met the children. "I was thinking about how strange fate is," Samuel replied. "Blackwood thought he was selling us into slavery. In reality, he was delivering us to freedom." "Freedom?" asked Ayana, smiling. "The freedom to choose who we want to be," Samuel explained. "The freedom to create our own family, our own identity. The freedom to choose kindness over bitterness." Ayana nodded. "It's the most important lesson we can learn. The power to choose is always within us." The legacy of the Seven. The story of the 7 McAllister brothers became legend among the Apache tribes, but it also spread to the outside world. Journalists traveled from eastern cities to document the extraordinary story of survival, forgiveness, and transformation. But for those who lived it, it was never just a story. It was a lesson about human nature, about the power of compassion to transform even the most desperate circumstances. Samuel lived to be 80, watching his great-grandchildren grow up in a world that had changed dramatically since his days of starvation in a Kansas cabin. Thomas established a school where Apache children learned both their people's traditions and the skills necessary to navigate the modern world. The twins became legendary guides, leading explorers and scientists through unexplored territories. Sarah established the first Native American-run medical clinic in the territory, where she treated people of all races and backgrounds. Benjamin wrote the first complete English Apache dictionary, preserving the language for future generations. And Daniel became a senator, the first Native American to serve in the U.S. Congress. But perhaps the most important legacy was the example they gave, that even in the darkest moments, when all seems lost, there is always the possibility of transformation, that families are not defined by blood, but by love and choice, and that true strength doesn't come from revenge, but from forgiveness. Jeremiah Blackwood spent the rest of his life trying to make amends for the damage he had caused, not only to the McAllister brothers, but to others he had harmed in his years as an unscrupulous trader. He never completely forgave himself, but he learned that forgiveness is not something you earn, but something that is given freely. And in the mountains of New Mexico, where the wind whispers stories of times past, you can still find the grave of Ayana, the Apache chief who taught 7 hungry children that home is not a place but a feeling. His headstone, carved from local stone, bears a simple but powerful inscription: "When you have the chance to choose between kindness and cruelty, you must always choose kindness. It is what makes us human." It is a lesson that resonated through generations, reminding all who heard the story that even the darkest beginnings can lead to the brightest endings, if we have the courage to choose compassion over fear and love over hate. The story of the 7 brothers reminds us that sometimes what seems like a tragedy can be the beginning of something extraordinary, and that true wealth is not found in sacks of corn or gold coins, but in the bonds we forge with those who choose to love us, not because they have to, but because they choose to. In a world where it's easy to divide people into us and them, the story of the McAllister brothers and Ayana's Apache tribe is a powerful reminder that humanity transcends cultural, racial, and linguistic differences. It is a story of hope in desperate times, of love in the midst of hate, and of the infinite capacity of the human heart to choose light over darkness. And so the story that began with 7 children being sold for a sack of corn became a legend of redemption, transformation, and the enduring power of adoptive love. A story that continues to inspire those who hear it to choose kindness, no matter how difficult the circumstances may be. Because in the end, we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to respond. And in that choice, we find our true humanity.